Our next speaker is Steve Schanwald, who is another protege of Russ. Started out with Russ at the University of Maryland as a student, went on to have a great career with the Chicago White Sox and 28 years with the Chicago Bulls in their heyday.
Thank you, Tom. I'm deeply honored and humbled to have been asked to speak here today. I'm going to begin my remarks with two definitions, actually two quotes. The great Warren Buffett, the greatest investor of our time, a multi-billionaire, was asked once how he defines success. And he said, "I don't define it by the amount of money you have, not by the number of houses that you own, not by the number of cars that you drive, but rather by the number of people who love you at the end of your life." The second quote is by the great Jackie Robinson, who said that a life is not important except for the impact it has on other people's lives. And looking around this room today, it is easy to see the number of lives that Russ impacted and the number of people who loved him. Russ was a very important man who lived a very important life. His impact on all of our lives, mine, yours, on this community, a community of people and places he loved genuinely with all his heart, could not be overstated. They told me that they're only giving me 5 minutes to sum up my remarks, to sum up Russ's life's accomplishments. They sent me a long list of those accomplishments so that I wouldn't leave anything out. And I can tell you that if Russ was alive today, he would kill them for that. He's up there in heaven, gritting his teeth, looking at Emily and the girls, and screaming about it. Allowing me only 5 minutes to sum up his life and accomplishments, it can't be done. Russ would want to be sure that you knew that he was elected to the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame. He'd want me to tell you about the company he founded, Russ Potts Productions, and the over 800 events he promoted in his lifetime. He'd want me to tell you about the attendance records he set at the University of Maryland and at SMU, about serving on the NCAA men's basketball committee, to list all the events he promoted and the attendance records he set in promoting them. The lists of his firsts, the awards that he won, are simply too numerous to list. We'd be here all day. Russ wouldn't care. He'd say, "So what, Schanwald? They got nowhere else they got to be. Tell them." But I tell you what, see me afterwards or send me an email and I'll send you the list. Russ was the greatest man I've ever known. He was a force of nature. We are only privileged to meet so many of those in one lifetime. In my career, I've been blessed to know many. From every president of the United States, from Gerald Ford to Joe Biden, from Michael Jordan to Muhammad Ali to John Wooden, from Arnold Palmer to Colin Powell. So when I tell you that Russ Potts was the greatest man that I've ever known, well, that's really saying something. Russ was Christmas and the 4th of July and the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade all wrapped into one. He was larger than life to me. To be in his energetic, positive, enthusiastic presence was a joy, a privilege, a blessing. He taught me so many great life lessons, but most importantly, he believed in me, and he gave me an opportunity, gave me a chance. And what greater gift could there be but for one person to believe in another, to overlook their flaws, we all have them, to love them even when they don't always deserve it, and to give someone an opportunity, to give them a chance, and to stay a loyal friend for life. Russ was a trailblazer. In 1970, he became the first sports marketing director in the history of intercollegiate athletics, eventually becoming associate athletic director at Maryland. There was no path to follow when Jim Kehoe named him to that position, so he made one. He defined what the role was to be, and he was the gold standard of that profession. Everywhere I went, everywhere, when people asked me how I got my start in the business, I mentioned that I worked for a guy by the name of Russ Potts while I was a student at the University of Maryland. People would knowingly nod their head. To my amazement, everyone somehow already knew of Russ, knew of his legacy. He had touched so many lives, and we here today are only a small fraction of the lives that he touched and his influence. I remember before I got the job, I went to work. My first job was at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, but before I had that offer, Russ Potts told me it might be a good idea if I joined the Terrapin Club. He said, but don't just write a check for $100, which is what it cost to join the Terrapin Club at the time. He said, go up to Jim Keogh's office, put quarters, nickels, and dimes in a baggie or in a chock full of nuts can and put it on his desk and tell him, I'm really appreciative of the opportunity you've given me to work at Maryland. I want to join the Terrapin Club. Here's $100 in quarters, nickels, and dimes. Like I had scrimped and saved for my whole life. So that was kind of Russ's approach to theatrics and trying to influence decisions. Russ was so highly respected that at the age of 22, upon graduation from Maryland, based solely on Russ's recommendation, the U.S. Air Force Academy named their first ever director of sports promotions, which led to a job with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And when Russ, who by then had become director of athletics at SMU, was named vice president of marketing for the White Sox, he took a chance on me once again to be his second in command at the Sox at the age of 25, which a few years later led to a near 30-year career overseeing business operations with the Chicago Bulls. And ultimately to the great life I'm enjoying today. None of it happens without Russ. I owe him everything and more than I could ever hope to repay. Russ wasn't at the White Sox for very long, maybe only 6 months. The lure of Winchester was calling. Russ wanted dearly to go home. He always talked about it, to get involved in Virginia politics, to make his state, his community, a better place for everyone. He served in the Virginia State Senate for 16 years. He had a huge heart, always quick to laugh and quick to cry, with a great empathy for people. And he sincerely wanted to improve the lives of all people, to make a difference, to leave the world a better place than he found it, and he did. From the very first year I met Russ in 1975, he always talked about Winchester, about apple blossom. From the earliest days, Russ always had a plan, a vision to get involved in politics, to return home to Winchester and do so, and not for selfish reasons, not for ego, though as we all know, Russ certainly had one, as most great men do. It's an essential ingredient of the great, in my view, but to make a difference in people's lives. So he returned home to his beloved Winchester, built a big old mansion on the hill right across from his beloved Handley High. He was elected state senator and started Russ Potts Productions, and today's event is certainly a Russ Potts production in every sense. He would be very proud of this. He had given this day some thought for many years, in fact. I remember vividly, in 1979, Russ happened to be in Pittsburgh while I was working for the Pirates. And we were taking a walk, and Russ said, literally through tears, I don't know how many people are going to be at my funeral, but I know one guy who had better be there, you, Schanwald. This was over 40 years ago, and he was only in his early 40s at the time. It stuck with me, so here I am, Russ. The only thing Russ loved more than Winchester were his girls, Christy, Katie, and Kelly, and his grandchildren, whom he bragged on constantly. He was so proud of them. And Emily, his life partner. You couldn't think of one without the other. They were a package deal. I thought of them as my second set of parents, giving me unconditional love and affection, friendship, and loyalty, which I hope they both felt I returned. Their picture hangs in both my homes, and my deepest condolences to you all, and may his memory be a blessing. To Russ, who never had any sons, he always told me and Joe and Monty and Chip and Jeff and many others that we were his boys, his sons, and he took great pride in all our accomplishments as though they were his own, which of course they were. We are the main branches of his tree, and the many branches that have sprung from it as a result of our careers and the people that we helped along the way as we paid it forward. Russ, I greatly miss our discussions about sports and politics and the events of the day. I will miss sharing our frustration with Maryland football and basketball. I will miss sharing our disappointment and frustration in some of the decisions and actions of our political leaders. I will miss our discussions about history, the books we're reading, and the world leaders we admired. I will miss you. There's not a day goes by that I don't think of you, when I don't say thank you for the great life I'm living and that you gave me. I know I would not be where I am today without you, would not have experienced all that I did without you, and I never took what you did for me, your kindness, your loyalty, for granted. I know many of us here today say the same. I can only hope you know how much we appreciated it and how loved you are by all of those whose lives you touched. Thank you.